All right, welcome to our WGRZ Bills Insider and NFL Insider Vic Carucci, the weekly segment, postseason edition now as an end-of-season edition with the Buffalo Bills bowing out in a big way in the divisional round against the Cincinnati Bengals. And Vic, we heard from head coach Sean McDermott. More pertinent even, I think, to this conversation, we heard from Brandon Beane on Tuesday. You wrote for WGRZ.com that the Bills' Super Bowl window, which once seemed so open, is now closing. Why?
Well, I think it comes down to, I call it simple math in this sense. A year ago, and heading into the 2022 season, this team looked like a completely built Super Bowl contender. There weren't areas that you saw that were glaring. The one spot that they addressed heavily, of course, was the Von Miller addition. But other than that, Josh Allen and company looked like a Super Bowl club. Much different now. They have multiple areas to address. And the math says you don't get all of that done in one off season.
You take a look at, and the question I had asked Beane about the salary cap situation, he pointed out prior to that the Bengals, for example, are this competitive with Joe Burrow on a rookie contract, for example. Jamar Chase, the receiver, same thing. The Bills are a bit further down the road in terms of their build and what the league mandates. When you have a franchise quarterback like Josh Allen, you have to pay him. The Bills did. Stephon Diggs, the extension, Dawson Knox signed, Von Miller, of course, is mentioned right in that conversation. So financially, he admitted he's at $240 million relative to the salary cap. It was $208 this past season. It's not going to go up far enough. The first thing they're going to have to do is work to get under the cap with restructuring. I think you'll see a key player or two release, that sort of a thing, before they can really in earnest address a number of areas which obviously need fixing.
Therein lies the problem. They're a team that is going to be beyond up against the cap. They're going to be over it, no doubt about it. And when the first priority is reducing that cap number versus adding to it by adding talent, you have a dilemma. And the dilemma is much bigger for a team that, if it's being truthful with itself, has multiple areas to address on both sides of the ball.
All right, with that limited spending and acknowledging all of that, in terms of priority, what is reasonable for fans to expect them to be able to address in a meaningful way and fix looking toward 2023?
Well, Adam, it's always about priorities, and it's up to the team, of course, to determine what's important, what's not. Now, I will say that the issues that they must address were lingering even through, say, the 8-game winning streak they had up to the point of that loss to the Bengals. But the Bengals playoff loss magnified the problems. And let's start with the offensive line. I thought in Spencer Brown, you saw a player in that game and in other games who is not ready to be an NFL starter, and I'm not sure if he will be. The fact that he was a small school product doesn't help, but his development just hasn't been there. And for that matter, on the left side at tackle is Deion Dawkins. And I think he, too, played well below the veteran fixture he's supposed to be. He's being paid to be. And they definitely did not get the play from him that they needed. And again, that showed up in a big way against the Bengals. The interior offensive line, especially the guard spots, could use upgrading there. So you're talking about, as many as 3 positions perhaps on the offensive line, and that's being conservative, I think, to address. And that's a big deal. Go from there to running back. You have James Cook, promising rookie, but Devin Singletary, who could likely be lost in free agency. And I don't know that the team necessarily feels all that bad about that, because I think they can do better. But the crying part about that position is you saw what Joe Mixon did for the Bengals. The Bills have nothing close to that at the running back position. And then we go to receiver. And of course, Stephon Diggs, one of the very best in the league. But who else is there opposite him to be a threat? They don't have that high-level receiver threat that makes defenses worry about what they do. They focus on Diggs, and if they're not getting anything else in the way of Gabe Davis producing, Dawson Knox has come around as a tight end, but it's that other receiver. Again, it's that Jamar Chase, T. Higgins combination that was so overwhelming for the Bengals that the Bills don't have at the receiver position. And that's just naming a few spots there. And on defense, you could talk about the secondary where you have Jordan Poyer likely out in free agency, Micah Hyde coming back from a major neck surgery. A lot of questions just lingering throughout the secondary.
Yeah, and that on top of a pass rush that they've already invested in to a great degree in high draft picks in recent years and in signings, a pass rush that simply did not deliver against a Bengals offensive line that was down 3 starters. Very, very disturbing as you kind of look at the various pieces that need upgrading. And then that just deals with the X's and O's, Vic, on the field. I was astounded to a great degree by how the Bengals absolutely dominated them from a coaching standpoint. I mean, right from the get-go, the Bills never were able to really, in any significant way, respond within that game in terms of tactics, in terms of the pressures that the Bengals were bringing on Josh Allen. Ken Dorsey didn't have an answer for it. I mentioned that the pass rush couldn't produce, down 3 starters on the offensive line for Cincinnati. That speaks to a great extent to Leslie Frazier. It seems as if the top end of the coaching staff is going to remain in place. I know we've seen Jim Salgado, the safeties coach. They've made a move on him. We'll see what else happens. But it seems like the coordinators, listening to Brandon Beane anyway, are going to remain in place. How concerned are you from a coaching perspective?
Well, I think the Bills should be taking a hard look at what they're doing strategically. If the plan is to go forth with Ken Dorsey and Leslie Frazier, there still has to be some hard conversations about what hasn't happened in the postseason for this team 3 years in a row, where coaching came into play as a liability. And especially in that Cincinnati game, let's talk about Dorsey, where you had Josh Allen looking clueless when it came to the work that Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator of the Bengals, was doing with fire zones, various pressure combinations. And with those fire zones, you're talking about a defensive back who's at that ready position of coming in as a pass rusher. And how many times did you see in that game Josh Allen just under siege? Sometimes it was the defensive ends, but often it was where these defensive backs just were free runners. He's got to recognize that. That has to be practiced and discussed thoroughly in leading up to the game. And then beyond that, communicate, Josh does, to his receiver that there's a sight adjustment, that there's got to be the ability to get open quickly so he can get the ball out of his hand quickly. We just didn't see that happen. And it looked like something that the Bills either didn't anticipate or if they anticipated it, weren't executing it. So that's a concern. On the defensive side, we mentioned that the Bengals were missing 3 offensive line starters. And it's inexcusable when you're not generating sufficient pressure with that liability for them. Joe Burrow, now look, he's going to play well. He'll play well even under duress. He's shown that. But the Bills gave absolutely nothing in the way of pressure that would make him feel even slightly uncomfortable. And I think that had a whole lot to do with his ability to just pick them apart. So it's a matter of not only getting production from the linemen who are on the field, minus Von Miller, but be creative with some pressure packages. We didn't see that.
So that's a lot, right? I mean, what we've described, what we've talked about, that's a lot to get corrected. And you look at the dynamics changing. You look at the conference, for example. You have the Bengals, 2nd straight trip to the AFC Championship game. You have the Kansas City Chiefs, now 5 straight trips to the AFC title game. You have the division improving. You have the possibility of key additions. I mean, nothing remains constant in the NFL anyway, but the competitive landscape in the AFC continues to evolve. And the Bills, like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, in terms of the key signings and money spent, to a great extent, they've made their bed. Now they have to lie in it, with a lot of teams kind of upgrading around them.
Yeah, that has to be a big concern because, again, there will be changes for the Bills, and I think there will be some that could be considered progress. But when you consider the salary cap dilemma they have, it's hard to imagine any appreciable jump in what they're doing, and especially if they stand pat with most of what we saw from a coaching standpoint and generally from a scheming standpoint, but let's look around them. It is going to get tougher. And you do have the Bengals now joining the Chiefs as another hurdle for Buffalo. We used to just call it Mount Kansas City or Mount Reed for them to navigate. It's bigger than that. And with the Chiefs and the Bengals, you have teams with outstanding quarterbacks who are going nowhere, teams that are well coached, teams that have a lot of weapons for those quarterbacks and a lot of support. And they too are going to make their various additions in the offseason to try to improve. And the Bengals, as we mentioned, working with a rookie contract quarterback, that helps a lot. And other rookies who are contributing in a big way, that helps a lot from a salary cap standpoint. And then look at the rest of the AFC. You've got in Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, a young quarterback who I think is going to continue to make upward movement. Justin Herbert, only going to get better with the Chargers. The Raiders might have an old Bills nemesis as their quarterback in 2023. Yes, Tom Brady could be a Raider. I don't know what he'll have left at 46 years old, but he always finds a way, that guy. And with Josh McDaniels as his coach, maybe he'll find it. So there too is another competitor to look at. And then just looking within the AFC East, does Mac Jones become a better quarterback now that he has a real offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien joining the Patriots staff? And oh, by the way, the Jets, they hired Nathaniel Hackett, former Bills play caller, as their offensive coordinator. Now, maybe that doesn't get anybody real concerned, but is that a prelude to them getting Aaron Rodgers, a guy who we know loves Nathaniel Hackett and was thought to be following him to Denver last year? That never happened. But is he going to follow him to New York? Because his future in Green Bay very much up in the air. Rodgers in the AFC East, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's already speculation that the Jets would desperate, obviously with Zach Wilson, the way that kind of flamed out, desperate for an answer at quarterback, and with a trade, in the works or whatever, potentially for Aaron Rodgers. That is legitimate speculation given the relationship with Nathaniel Hackett. Vic Carucci, you can read him weekly at WGRZ.com. You can see him weekly as well, 7:30 Monday night, Sports Talk Live Buffalo. That show continues through the course of the offseason, through hockey season and beyond, along with Paul Hamilton and other members of our sports team. So that'll do it. Thanks for joining us. WGRZ.com, WGRZ Plus. For Vic Carucci, I'm Adam Benigni, Channel 2 Sports.